Welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm your co-host, Serge Boudreau, and every episode I will be joined by my co-host, Yves Boudreau. We delve into the world of work from the employer and employee viewpoint. Kick back, relax, and let's talk work. Beacon Bits starts right now. Hello and welcome to Beacon Bits, episode number 9. Yves, we have surpassed the 6 episodes as we've talked before, and we're on our way to 100 episode. Just another 91 to do.
Yeah, so by 2027, we should be there.
So we've taken a little bit of a break, and now we're back and we're fully energized and we're ready to talk about the world of work. But while we were on break, I went to visit you in New Brunswick and we went to play golf, but not actually on a golf course. We went to one of those, what do you call them? What do they call
It's called the Bunker. It's actually a really cool spot. Yeah, it's a simulator / bar. I think the biggest thing is that the ball comes back the way that a bowling ball comes back when you go bowling. So you don't have to actually go get the ball and put it on a tee every time. And yeah, it's a fun experience. It's interesting because you were pretty confident coming in because I believe we talked about it on the previous podcast that we're going to bet. We're going to put something on the line. And I think we kept it pretty kosher. I think it was $2 per hole, whoever wins. So somehow you ended up owing me $18 at the end of it. But I will say this, you were better than I expected you were.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Your expectations must have been pretty low because I won 0 holes. We were 3 playing and I owe Ben $23. I owe you $18. I tied 2 holes though, but let's put in perspective. I haven't golfed in 2 years. You saw, I've got the swing. I think I can put it together and be decent, right? Hopefully.
Yeah. If you put a little bit more work on that upper body strength too, you'll probably be able to hit 150-yard drives within a matter of weeks here.
Okay, yeah. So beating my 72-yard drives. You know why I was so confident though? Because we were going to play 2v2 and my potential partner shoots in the 70s. So I'm like, yeah.
He actually won his men's league at his golf course last week. So he shot 69, I think.
He can drive probably, 350?
No, he can definitely drive over 300. I don't know that he's hit 350. Maybe. I'll have to ask him. I have no idea.
Anyway, but I love the concept. It was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I found it really realistic. It's the first time I've ever done that. And it's a lot of fun.
Well, it's cool because you can play courses that no one will let us in. So you can play some of the PGA courses that we see on TV. That's as close as it's going to get for you and I think.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to play Pebble Beach or Augusta, but we got the opportunity. So it was good to be on the east coast of Canada. I had a great vacation. It was great to see you guys as well. But now we're back at it. How about we jump into our first topics? And Yves, I want to talk about something from a recent article that I saw, and I want to dovetail this into how you retain and attract top talent. In the article, it shows that most Americans are actively looking for new opportunities. 28.4% are saying that they've been job hunting over the past 4 weeks. That is the highest level since 2014. Yeah. It's really surprising to me because if you look at it, it's definitely an employer market. People looking for jobs at that level, 28.4%, it's actually higher than when it was during the Great Resignation 2 years ago.
I agree. I was surprised when I saw that number too, 28%. So essentially 1/3 of all Americans roughly are looking for jobs. Hypothesis is that, like you said, it's an employer's market. So if you have job security right now, why would you be looking? But interestingly enough, a stat that is in that same article that might not actually be as prominent is the fact that 4.4% of people are fearful that they're going to lose their jobs in the next few months. And so maybe that is the correlation. Instead of waiting for shit to hit the fan, they're essentially looking for opportunities ahead of time. So I'm assuming that might be part of it, but I feel there's been a bit of a dichotomy in the whole industry in the last couple of years in general. So it seems to be always currents swimming against each other.
Yeah.
at the moment. It does feel a bit odd.
But do you think high profile layoffs at Intel, Cisco, Dell, there's a lot of prominent companies that have done a significant amount of layoffs. Do you think that's concerning to employees being like, oh, maybe it is a little rough here and I should be looking if there's other opportunities because potentially layoffs could be coming? I think that's got to be one of the factors that's happening right now.
It could be. It's hard to tell. I saw an article yesterday, and that one kind of concerned me a lot, which was GM announced that they're laying off over 1,000 software engineers. And so you question whether that's just part of an adjustment of priorities for the organization, or is it AI that's starting to have some impact? I saw another interview with the CEO of AWS, and he was even saying yesterday in this interview that it's a matter of time before software engineers aren't going to be coding anymore. So it's definitely an odd time, and I think some people are on eggshells right now, understandably so.
Well, I think anytime that it's an employer market, people stay back for a little bit, right? And then when they start seeing a little bit of movement in the market, they start becoming more active because people will stay at jobs they don't like if there's not a lot of options. But when they start feeling, hey, maybe there is options, they should start looking. But also, like, how serious are they? Because it doesn't go in detail of, okay, they're job hunting. Does that mean applying to a job once a month when it pops up on their LinkedIn or Career Beacon job alert? Is that what's happening right now?
Maybe they're just paying more attention to
Yeah.
who's hiring. If I'm in their shoes, I would do the same, especially depending on what type of job that you do, that you fear that there might be some automation or things that could impact your role in the future. Then maybe you look for opportunities that are a little safer, and even looking for companies that are hiring today, because a lot of companies are laying off. So it's like,
Mm.
okay, if I'm actually joining a company that's hiring, I might be joining a company that's on an upward trajectory. So that might be part of it.
Well, do you think also, because we see layoffs and we mention all those companies that have done layoffs, but those companies are hiring too. So I think there's a little bit of a skill mismatch or role mismatch of the type of skills that are needed. Some of them they have to lay off, but they're replacing that headcount with roles that are more viable in this current economy as well. So it's messy out there. But if so many people are looking for jobs, how is it going to affect turnover in the next couple of years as well? And
Mhm.
for organizations, that can be disastrous. If you're losing your key people, just think about the company knowledge, the industry knowledge that you're losing when they go somewhere else. There's a difference of good retention and bad retention. If your
Totally.
employees are crappy, well, it's okay to let them go to the next role. But the ones that are excellent performers, how do you keep them engaged? And
Mm.
that's where I really want to focus this conversation. And I know you've had a lot of different programs, different things as you run companies, but working with you directly, a big part of your retention strategy is building that one-on-one relationship with that employee and knowing exactly what's going on in their world and understanding that. But for entrepreneurs, especially if you have less than, say, 10, 20 employees, losing a couple of employees can be disastrous. What's your advice for them?
That's a great question. I don't know if I'm doing anything specific. I just go by what comes naturally to me. So I will say that I know you mentioned that part of my approach is that I build strong one on one relationships, but that's not always scalable. And something that I had to adjust from the first version of this company to what the company is today. But I think that's part of it. I think transparency, honestly, is very underrated. I know it's a
Yeah.
bit of a cliche word, but people always understand where we are as an organization. I don't hide anything from them. And everyone's voice is also heard. But again, not all of that's always 100% scalable.
Are you nervous when you do that? When you're sharing, say, information about the company that maybe is not as rosy? Do you think about it before? Because that could have a negative effect to certain folks.
No, I don't. The only thing that I will be careful on is the timing of the information sometimes,
Mm,
depending on what else is happening or depending on what impact a certain decision might make on other people in the organization. But my thought process is if you don't feel comfortable with the current conditions or certain things that are happening within the organization today, whether the company's not doing well, there's some challenges ahead, and that's totally okay. Not everyone's wired for that. I basically want people that are in the trenches with me and Ben and are comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Sometimes people strive when you share information around the company that's struggling or things are happening, like they take that as a challenge to try to do better, to try to help contribute in other parts of the organization. But yeah, I've never really held anything back. I
Yeah.
think the only time we would hold something back is if the decision was like I don't know, let's say a massive pivot or something that we didn't feel was far enough that we still have some discovery to make before we're ready to share it with the team. But otherwise, I don't believe there's anything that I really held back on with the team.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially as your team grows and it's scaling as well. That one-on-one personalized relationship is not always possible, but this is where you train the manager to work with the employees or whoever is leading those folks as well. Because I don't know, we've seen such a big shift in the last like 15, 20 years as far as the employer employee relationship. And obviously, it's going to keep changing. How do you get people to, I don't know, envision their own dream within your company, if that makes any sense? How can you make your vision big enough that their vision fits into your vision of the company and keeps them motivated is probably one of the biggest challenges that any manager or leader or CEO has, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's impossible.
It's easier for me to do that than it is for a manager to paint that vision. And every
Yeah.
time that you delegate that to another person, it's harder for them to create that picture. For me, when I recruit, it's the promise of the individual that's joining the team or that's part of the team. It's just the growth that they're going to have and the opportunities that opens up for them. And I'd love to see someone come here, spend 3 to 5 years, grow like crazy, and then just, have other opportunities open to them. Like, obviously, you never want to lose good people, but
Yeah.
sometimes you have to do what's right for the individual. Like, you can't get in the way of a good opportunity that could transform their lives. It's an interesting one. I almost feel like that would be a better question to ask our top performers in this organization. Like, what's kept them motivated to stay here and to keep performing at the highest level over the years, even through the ups and downs, versus me saying that I have a specific kind of strategy or approach. I do think it's just transparency, trust, and the growth opportunities that come with the role, but they might have a different perspective on it.
Yeah, I think this is the challenge because a lot of the information that's out there of how you retain your top employees is pretty generic. And some of it is pretty straightforward. It's easy to say, but not as easy in practice. Because if I look through the list of, okay, what are the things that you have to focus on to make sure you're retaining your employees? The first one that comes up is salary and benefits. This is where, okay, I have a thought. A lot of people say they quit their manager and they don't quit the job. I don't agree with that. I do think there's certain situations that people quit their
I've never heard
managers.
that before.
You never heard of that?
No, like they quit there because of they have a bad manager?
Yeah.
Like
Whoever they're reporting
their
to
direct report
is
is.
the reason why they're quitting.
Yeah, no, then I've heard that. I just never heard that expression, but yeah, I'm aware of the concept.
I think it happens, but I don't think it's the biggest thing. People work a job for money. It's not always the only factor, but it's definitely a considerable factor. So if you're paying your employees significantly lower than what's out there in the marketplace, it's going to be tough to compete. It's going to be tough to keep them, even if you're a tremendous employer, unless there's a serious upside or there's something on the other side that makes sense for that employee. But you can't be severely underpaying people compared to the market, right? It's the same with benefits.
You know something that's crazy? In the 10 plus years history of this company, we've only ever had one person ever ask for a raise.
Real.
Yeah.
One person
In
asked
over
for a
10
raise,
years.
but you've given raises proactively.
Yeah, we do all the time. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's the difference, right?
Yeah. We're very competitive, but that's part of the transparency aspect of us sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly about the organization is we don't do it intentionally with that in mind, but people realize that when we can give a raise, we will. We're always very transparent about communicating those things. I still remember a few years ago having a conversation with members of the team and be like, hey, we know you're worth more than what we're able to pay you right now. We just can't, we're in a tough bind. But when we actually were able to do the raise, we actually backdated it by when we believe we should have done it originally. But yeah, it's just being upfront and transparent. And as long as your team knows that you always have their best intentions, that's how you keep good people.
Well, that's fairly rare, to be honest. It doesn't happen a lot in my career. There hasn't been a lot of situations where they proactively wanted to give me more money. Actually, no. Now they're saying it has happened. And that might say something about me as well.
I didn't want to say. I feel like you made that realization halfway through that comment.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, that actually doesn't sound really good for me. Career advancement is the other one that we talk about. And like, it's easy to say, but it's not always realistic depending
Totally.
on the size and the scope and what the type of organization it is. So it's not only about career advancement, but it's open to doing different things or expanding the role or doing some exciting projects that might not be in your normal job description. Like, I think you can play around with that one.
Yeah, people think of career progression as strictly a vertical thing, and it's not always the case. You can still have moments where your career progression is horizontal because you're expanding your knowledge by working with other parts of your organization. And so for us, we have a lot of horizontal progression, but we're such a small team that there's not that many steps to go. So the title might not change, but your capabilities for your next opportunities are definitely going to be night and day from when you started with us to when you leave. And that's when you can make that vertical progression afterwards. But you're still progressing. You know, we have Mike who's been here for 10 years, which is insane to think in the world of startups. But like Mike is still learning new things every week. He's still bringing new ideas to the table. He's not jaded by any means or stale. Like a lot of it is the mindset of the individuals as well. Because two different individuals could work 5 years in the same organization.
Yeah.
One of them could be very different than the other person who's spent 5 years doing the same thing. 5 years.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's your thoughts here around flexibility? Because it's the number one thing that employees are saying right now that's making them stay at an organization, especially in a world of return to office, hybrid. Employees are looking for flexibility, which is a lot harder for large organizations compared to small organizations or mid-level. Is that something that's even, like, on the radar for employers anymore? Like, everyone's just like, "Come into the office," but employees are saying that is the most critical thing for me right now.
That's a tough one. I can't speak for all types of organizations. I think some of them can do it a lot easier than others. I don't want to be disrespectful of saying, hey, everyone should be able to do it. I think everyone should be able to offer some form of flexibility. How
Yeah.
far does that go? I don't know. Like, we've always been flexible here from before the pandemic, before all these things that essentially were mandated in some ways. We always had that flexibility in the first place. But in most cases, it's something that most people don't take for granted and they leverage it when needed.
Mm.
But I have seen the opposite as well, where someone uses flexibility as too big of a perk, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's also like a trust thing. If you trust me that I'm going to create the right environment for you to be able to be successful in this drive, then I need to trust that you're going to do the same on your end, that you're going to meet and surpass the expectations that we have for you as an individual, like joining the team. In some ways, I don't want to say that flexibility is earned, but I think there is a layer of it that's earned. There are people here or like that I've worked with over the years that it wouldn't matter where in the world that they're working. I would just know that the work is getting done. And there's others
Yeah.
that are still not there 100% of the way yet. But
So I want to jump into another topic that really has made waves here in HR. It's a New York Times article talking about how everyone hates HR and how miserable HR is. So let's try to put a positive spin on
I
this.
hate HR. Can I
Well,
say this?
I don't hate HR.
No, I hate the term HR.
Oh, you hate the term HR. It sounded like you hate HRs.
I know. I just took it as an opportunity because you said that everyone hates HR. So I'm going to jump on the bandwagon. Yeah. I
Well,
hate the term HR because of the negative connotation that it's carried over the years. I don't hate the people that are in HR. I don't hate the
oh
concept of
no,
HR.
that's going to be the clip. That's going to be the clip that we put
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah,
I
sure.
hate
Yeah.
HR.
I hate HR. Yeah.
Okay, before we go into the details of this, why do you hate the term HR, human resources?
I hate the term because of the the negative connotation that it's had over the years of how people view HR, and how if you were to create some adjectives for it, like people see HR as boring, as
Mhm.
a detriment to the growth of innovation of companies, as essentially a narc for the employer. There's just a lot of negative connotation to what HR really is. And that's why you've seen a lot of companies switch from HR to people and culture or
Okay,
to
that better. Like people in
I
culture, like they've tried to rebrand
I know. Yeah.
HR.
I don't know if it's better.
Because I hate people in culture. Like I've been in departments, but HR doesn't own culture. Let's be realistic about that.
No, but I mean HR can influence culture.
Yeah, so can anyone, right?
No, I agree. I totally agree. By the way, I'm not saying that I agree that's what HR is. I just want to
Mm.
be clear. I don't believe that HR is the things that I've said it was. Human resources, first of all, is as boring of a title as you can get.
Let's go through the history quickly of what the titles were, then we'll move away
Oh,
from.
are we going back in time?
Yeah, we're going to go back in time. The first was in the 1920s, and it was actually called welfare. Not welfare that you collect, but it was like
Yeah,
and designed to the welfare of the employees was the
I
first
had
one.
no
Then
idea. That was during your time, right?
yeah, that's when I was just a little boy, started in HR. Then during the Don Draper Mad Men era of the 50s and up to the 70s was the personnel department. And that lasted
Yeah,
until like almost 90s. Then it moved to human resources.
I do remember the personnel department. It's a
Mm.
term I've heard before. Welfare, I had no idea. So if you compare it to both of those titles, it's definitely a step forward. So if there's been an evolution from welfare to personal department to HR or human resources, what is the next logical
I
thing
don't
that
think it
makes the most
matters,
sense?
right? It's like trying to rebrand something that everyone in an organization is going to call HR. I've been in organizations where it was HR and we changed it to people and culture. Employees hated it. It's be like, oh, I need to talk to HR. Oh, sorry, people and culture, like in a mocking term. But anyways, the title aside, let's just go a little bit where HR is right now. HR in the past, since the pandemic or even before the pandemic, has been in the firing squad of everything going on, right? Like we think about when COVID hit, we had to get every employee remotely. Who did that? That was all HR getting that aligned. Then having the Me Too movement, you're seeing basically huge cultural changes in the workplace as far as how people want to be treated. You think about mental health, all of this has been on HR's shoulders. And even though a lot of the times they've done a lot of work and they've been successful in being able to drive this, like most companies, if you ask them in 2019, can you get all your employees remotely within a couple of days? They would have said no. And HR was a big factor in getting that done. But also now we're in a position that, okay, people are coming back into the office. They're being mandated. Who's the bad guy? HR has been the bad guy in a lot of these initiatives, and they don't get credit for the good things they've done.
Yeah.
They get shit for the things that the executives want to push. And generally, they're hating their jobs, is what this article says. Like HR hates being in HR.
They're also being recorded now when they're laying off people and put all over the
Yes,
internet. So
true. Although I'll tell you this has worked out worse for the employee
yeah,
reporting than it
that
has for
part.
the HR folks,
Totally.
because there's the example of Brittany, I believe was her name, and
A
she
few of
had
them.
a post begging for a job a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's why I sympathize a lot with HR people. Again, do not hate HR people, just hate the term HR, because those are great examples again of why people don't like HR, right? Because they're not celebrated for the good things they do, like to help these organizations shift remotely and to approach recruiting remotely all of a sudden and to change internal work policies and those types of things. And then it's like, okay, now we're shifting gears and we're essentially laying off hundreds of people, but you're going to be the person doing that as well. Like, it's just, yeah, it's a tough job. It's a very tough job. So I'm not surprised that they hate their job right now.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? Reading this article, they interview Kyle Lagunas, who's aptitude, and I've met him several times. And this was all done at Unleash. And all of these HR conference, there's a bunch of them. I think it's where the HR people really let loose.
Yeah.
Because I've been to like a lot of conferences and like living in the world of sales conference, you would think would be rowdy and crazy. Not as much as HR conference. They really go all out.
Yeah, I've been to a few. I've been to one where it was like the most depressing thing ever because everyone was just talking about how miserable they were. And I've been to the other one where people just let loose, letting the dragon out essentially for all of the depression and frustrations of the last year since the last conference. It is interesting. I have friends like that. They have this one big outing once a year that they just make up for lost time. It's an interesting concept, but yeah, I've heard stories of those conferences.
So what can HR do to change the perception out there from the employees, but also for them to start liking their jobs more? Is it technology? Because that seems to be an issue as well, because who has the shittier technology? Generally HR. Would
No,
better
I
be
would say that I
technology?
don't know if that's true anymore. It's
Oh, I
there's
think it
still
is.
room for improvement, but I think it's a way better than it's ever been.
Well, potentially in a world of like Workday and SAP
Yeah, I
success
guess. Yeah.
factors, and I don't know if it's better, but how can they be perceived better within their organization?
I think we touched on this before a little bit where they just need to be visible and if they have the bandwidth is to be able to participate in other parts of the organization just like everybody else has to. In most organizations everyone has to cross pollinate across different roles, but it is tough. Like we talked about this earlier, like the HR person, the relationships in an organization, typically if you're working with a colleague, you can go out for a beer and just chill out, and a lot of people develop real friendships at work.
Yeah,
It's a little harder to do if you're the HR person in those instances, right? Because at the end of the day, even if you want to do what's best for the employees, oftentimes you're at the mercy of what management and leadership wants to do. And depending on how that management and leadership leads that organization, that may not always align with what's best for employees. Hopefully it does, but it can be a tough position to be in. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
yeah.
I don't know. What do you think? You're definitely been closer to those roles over the years than I have.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest complaints within organizations or within HR people is they don't have a seat at the table when it comes
Mm,
to making decisions and being part of the executive team. But I think that's been HR's fault, right? We have not focused on the right metrics. We have focused on metrics that in our world maybe makes sense, but to the executive, it doesn't. It's like, okay, our turnover was this percent, or time to fill is this. But we have not done a good job of taking those metrics and correlating it to business results, being like, hey, our turnover is now this. This is how much money we've saved because of this. Our time to fill is this, is how much money we've been able to gain because of doing that. So if we want to change our perception within organizations and be taken more seriously, we got to think about business metrics, not HR metrics. We're business people, not HR people. And I think that's a big shift for a lot of folks that are doing this type of work, because HR has always been focused on making sure that companies don't get sued. It's a massive
yeah,
focus.
yeah. I mean, the traditional HR roles that we grew up with. I mean, I work with in big organizations, and HR roles was the complaint box.
Think
Everyone
about what a
just
shitty job that is, just dealing with
yeah.
people's
I don't know if there's still a lot of those that are like that out there, but I know I've been in an organization where it's just like people going in and instead of resolving situation with colleagues amongst colleagues. So I don't know if that's still a big thing
it
today, but
still is, it still is, especially depending on the type of roles that they're the mediator, and
yeah.
no one wants to deal with that. But in saying that, I think we've given information to the HR folks so they can unleash the dragon, as you would say.
Uh, my thing with HR, and that's actually going to be my topic. I'm speaking at CPHR Atlantic in October,
Okay.
and I tend to use the platform to be pretty direct. But to me, like everything is evolving. Like literally every discipline in an organization is changing. And I think HR is no exception. What are changes that HR individuals can lead today that will have an impact on their own jobs, but also in the organization that they have? And so I want to talk a little bit about just some of those things that I believe need to happen. But I do think that HR is much more innovative than people think, or has the potential to be much more innovative than people think, because again, the stigma of HR being stuck in its ways, and I don't think that's true anymore.
Well, I
Uh,
think there's a big difference between large organizations and how advanced and innovative they are compared to mom and pops, SMBs, which they're not in my experience. And there might
well, they
be
also
some,
don't have HR people.
yeah, they might have one and it's seen as an admin role, really, like it's
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
processing
An admin that has the HR
new
role.
employees or payroll, right? I agree. I think HR has the opportunity to evolve like other parts of the organization, but I think we have to evolve quicker than most other parts of the organizations because we're setting the direction of what the people plan is for those different divisions.
Yeah, if I was to give any advice, it would be, and it's the most common thing that I've heard over the last 10 years when it comes to implementing change is the words, I'm too busy. I'm
Mm,
too busy. And I think that's not going to cut it. You want to be able to carve out time right now to adjust how you're doing things so that you can stop saying, I'm too busy all the time, because I think you're too busy doing things inefficiently in most cases.
mm.
But I don't know of any other types of roles over the years that you reach out to someone or that you talk to someone about implementing change, or have you seen this or tried this or did this? And the default go to is always, I'm too busy or I
Mm.
can't. And I just don't think I'm too busy and I can't are going to be acceptable in the next few years here, because organizations are going to expect these things to happen.
Interesting perspective because in reality, they've been too busy because all of the shit gets piled onto them. But I
Totally.
agree, like we have to figure out a way that that is not the case. So on
Sure.
that note, another great episode of the Beacon Myths. Our ninth episode. Next one will be 10. And we're gonna keep getting better and better at this, Eve. It's starting to have a lot of fun doing this.
I'll bring some cake to
Bring
celebrate our
some cake.
10th episode.
We've got some
You
facts.
love cake.
Yeah, I love cake. All right.